So good news, guys! We're gonna do some random reviews that aren't Transformers, because I know everyone's been requesting it and everyone's wanted to see other things on this series, and it's finally gonna happen. But first, it's going to be a Glyos toy, and I know, don't click back, hear me out on this one. 4-day conventions are a new thing for me. I'm still really worn out from MetroCon, and I came home to a water heater that isn't working, so I have yet to take a hot shower after that long weekend. So I'm kind of like easing back into things, and we're going to go slowly, and I'm going to do something a little bit easier to handle. And actually, I've really been excited for this release. This came in while I was gone at the convention, and it's really had my attention ever since this first started getting shown off. This is the AV Robot. This is a brand new Glyos creation from Nemo's factory. The very first release for a brand new series of Glyos toys. And, oh, I'm so happy. This is such a cool design. Like, this screamed to me. And we're going to get into some of the obvious stuff first. First off, just to get some of the basics out of the way, since it is a Glyos toy, you can tell just from the size of my hand, yep, it's a kind of a small-ish toy, as these tend to be. For a Glyos, though, it's actually not bad. Like, here's your standard Colgrim, and it's actually just a hair taller, which means your standard Onel Traveler is actually quite short in comparison. And as you can see, it is a unique colorway. It doesn't really match any of the previous ones. This is about as close as it gets. And it's actually a pretty unique color. Now, for the first release, he wanted it to be a little bit special, so it's heavily paint detailed. There's about 30 paint apps strewn about this figure, which is pretty heavy as far as Glyos toys go. And you can see it's mostly in that, there's a few colors that stand out, like that burnt orange. That looks really nice against the pale orange plastic, but it's highlighted in yellow paint, which is a much more subtle detail. And it goes from little bits of detail, like the knees, for instance, to enormous areas, like, say, the forearm, which is completely yellow painted all the way around. And I really like how it looks on the chest with the orange kind of bleeding through all the cracks that didn't get painted. It's a much more subtle, much more pleasant looking paint. Like, I'm actually quite happy with this rather than kind of going outlandish with the color. It kind of gives it a little bit more depth and, I don't know, a little bit of sophistication, I think. I think it works out really well. And the blue highlighting really works out too. You can see on the back, the little spinal column was also painted up with little dots of blue all the way to the top. And this is another part I really like about the figure. Look at the molding on him. The molding is really cool because Glyos toys are typically very plainly molded, very simple and rounded detail. But you can see a lot of little bits here and there, like all these wires strewn about inside the belly, as well as through the neck, and all these little pieces of metal and wire hanging through the bicep. You can also see that on the spinal column, going all the way up the back. Just so much detail lavished in. There's the back of the TV head. Just tons of things going on. You can see wrapped up wire, little bits hanging out. And he gets a very, like, very Junkion type of robot going on. You know, like he was built from a scrap heap. And you can kind of see that with little things like exposed pistons there in the thighs and hinges at the knees, which lots of little details. I love these little details. And it's a bit of a fun design because not only, of course, well, we'll get to the obvious one back at the top, but I like that he's just kind of wearing normal sneakers. Like, no robot feet at all. It's just straight up Nikes. But I think the big detail as far as eye-catching and uniqueness is that TV head. And you can think of a few TV-headed characters. There's a few that come to mind. But I think that's a really unique look because there's nothing in Glyos that really went for any kind of aesthetic like that. It's a really fun toy. Like, it's got enough uniqueness going on that it's got a lot of personality to it, without even trying, really. You can definitely tell there's an interesting backstory behind the character and the toy when you've got all these weird aesthetics going on between sneakers and TV head. Like, obviously, this thing was built up, this thing was built up from spare parts of some kind. Now, for articulation on the toy, you do have, it's all Glyos pegs, so it's all in rotation. So, rotation at the neck, forward shoulders, bicep, wrists. You get a waist rotation, hips that go forward and back, rotation at the knee, rotation at the ankle. It's all rotation. So nothing too complicated. Like, he'll need some axis joints in order to get some like universal movement going. But it's not bad for a Glyos toy. And there's a few things about it that do kind of get to me, but in some ways it works out too. The arms, for instance, one is only slightly bent and the other one far more bent. So the arms never stand parallel to each other, but it also kind of gives it a more natural look. And as well, something that's kind of unique about this, as far as Glyos toys, the legs are almost completely straight, whereas typically there's kind of a bend. Again, trying to give it more of a natural look and kind of replace any of the missing articulation and posability, but here, straight up. And for the robot aesthetic, I think that works. Now, it's not enough that it's a cool design on its own, but as a Glyos toy, it's quite serviceable. For instance, I'll show you. Here's one completely disassembled. It is an 18-piece build. There is a lot going on here. And really, there's a lot here that I could see getting used in a lot of different ways. Like, for instance, the shoes that kind of peg in just like any of the feet parts on a lot of Glyos toys. You got your pelvis that works both ways and things like that. Unique bits like the shoulder piece that I'm sure a lot of customizers are going to find some use for. There's a lot here to like. There's a lot of things going on that are going to lead to some very interesting customs, even some I've had ideas for. But I think what's really cool about this toy is options, because right out of the starting gate, Nemo really came up with something cool for an added feature on this toy. I mean, it's not enough that the robot aesthetic is neat and cool, but he took advantage of it, and you'll get to see why he's the AV robot. We can take the head off, and we are going to replace it with one of the alternate heads that this toy comes with. Hang on, if I work that in, and boom! Camera head. Now you start to see the AV, like he is the audio-visual robot. So this is kind of cool. I really dig this. Like, it's kind of like a security camera with wings on the back. So there's a little bit of a headpiece to it. And it also continues the spinal theme. So it matches the deco, it matches the mold pattern, and a little bit of cording going along on the front of the neck. And again, just a little subtle bit of the yellow around the lens just to make that detail pop a little bit more. It's a really cool idea. It's like, let's base all the heads off of audio-visual equipment. That's kind of cool. And this one also, because it is a two-piece head, the neck is separate. So you can use that little thin bit for extra details in a custom build, or you can get 2 points of rotation out of the head now. That's a neat little touch. I will admit that piece is so thin, getting it on and off can be kind of scary if the peg is a little bit too thin. I'd say the same thing about how thin the biceps are. So maybe a slight design oversight there. But, see, this is just a little bit worrying. But it's still a really cool concept. And he continued it. Oh yeah, this is going to start getting weird. This is the speaker head, which is kind of weird because it's kind of like in this color scheme, it's kind of a psychedelic eyeball thing going on. But this head itself is actually kind of unique. You can see it is a speaker on some massive hinge. Again, the molding and the paint is all kept, so it looks like it belongs there. Yes, yeah, it's just a flat plate, but it looks like it belongs there. But it's actually a pretty genius head to go with, because you can tampograph anything you want onto the face of that, and that's what it ends up being. Like, this could be a completely detailed face. This could be another speaker face that just happens to look like an eyeball or something. You can print an iPhone on this thing, and it would still look correct. It's a very versatile piece, even though it really doesn't look like much, and it gives him kind of this really weird, kind of creepy aesthetic. When I look at it, I get a little bit of like chair-faced Chippendale. Like, that's not supposed to be a head. Shout out to all my Tick fans out there. So here, we'll go back to the normal head, but we're not going to use this port. We're going to use the port that's on the back, because when we plug it in, you get a fourth head, which is much more robotic. This is the only one that really doesn't have any audio-visual cues in it. It's just straight up Cyclops robot. And that's actually extremely clever to use the top of that monitor head to create a fourth head in the set without adding to the part count. Really good design, really well thought out here, and I really like the shape of that head. It's a really cool design. So, as Glyos toys go, this one's very talkable. I didn't do this as like a Glyos 101 because it's a brand new company. There's really not a whole lot to discuss. So, this is just the start of this toy company's history, and I hope it has a long history because I really, really want to see this in other colorways. Which reminds me, yes, he is fully aware of Conti from Fooly Cooly, and maybe we will see this toy in like a light teal or red colorway down the line. Right now, I'll put the link in the description. Nemo's Factory is currently selling this guy, as well as the comic book that describes his origins. Now, I will tell you, since this is a DX release and the very first release of the bot, it is on the expensive side for a Glyos figure, running about $20. Yeah, that's a bit of a hit considering, like a Weaponeer is quite a bit bulkier for that kind of price, but it is such a cool little toy. Like, I'm not disappointed with the money I spent. And it's hard to look at that and go, oh, little $20 figure, but this is what I love about this. One guy made this. One guy. Like, there's a lot of hard work and a lot of love put into these things just so one person can have their own toy line. It's an incredible thing, and I love to support things like that. So I'm perfectly happy with it, and it's a very cool toy all on its own. And for Glyos collectors, there's a lot to love about this. So I'm hoping for a bright future for Nemo's Factory and a lot of luck on his first release. So hopefully we can get a lot more of these guys, because, man, I need a lot more TV heads in my life. Strangely enough, I don't have many TV heads in my life now that I think of it. I have to work on that. If you have a TV for a head, leave a comment below, and maybe we'll get back to you.